Hello again. Welcome to another episode of Leading from Alignment with our good friend John Opalewski. Podcast number 204. John, how you doing today?
I'm doing good. It's good to be recording together with you today, Jim.
Right on, right on. I'm glad that today I get to wear a sweatshirt, and I'm also glad that I didn't wear the shirt I was going to wear because it's identical to yours. And for those that are watching, it would have been a little strange for our watchers. Like, what do they coordinate? Is this a new uniform? But so anyway,
Uh,
give us the skinny. What's going on with pod number 204?
hey, Jim, the title of it is called the Co-vocational Balancing Act. And this is an idea that's really was sent to us by one of our
Yeah,
weekly watchers. In fact,
yeah.
he and his entire staff watch this podcast every week and take notes.
Wow.
And he sent me a note a while back and said, "Hey, John, would you consider uh, devoting an entire
Yeah,
podcast to this subject?" And I said, "Of course we would. We'd love to do that."
right.
Um,
Yeah.
in 2015, we knew we had a stat that said this: 38% of pastors in the United States were co-vocational. That means they worked
Right.
inside the church and they worked outside the church.
Yeah.
Um, and I'm of the opinion, I don't have data to back it up, that that number is increased
Hmm.
since 2015. Almost every church has at least one co-vocational pastor on their team.
Yeah.
Almost every
Yeah.
church that I know.
Yeah.
Tim Deal, I don't know Tim personally, but he gives a reasonably good definition of co-vocational pastor as a person who serves as a pastor in a church and also carries one or more other jobs in order to supplement his or her finances.
Yeah.
And this isn't a new phenomenon. This is as old as the New Testament, right? That,
Yeah. Paul.
the
Yep.
Apostle Paul swung between full-vocational ministry. He was a tent maker and then full
Hmm.
time, and he went back and forth between the two. So it's not a new thought process or a new concept. What is new is the percentage of
Hmm.
co-vocational pastors in the U.S. continues to climb. And I was co-vocational for a while, and I think, Jim, I think there are some advantages
Hmm.
to co-vocational ministry.
Yep.
One, you have dual sources of income, and I think sometimes that's a strength. You definitely have a better feel for what people in the marketplace are dealing with. I think it makes you a better preacher.
Yeah.
Because of that, you understand what your people face day
Yep.
in, day out. The marketplace is increasingly vulgar. There are bosses in the marketplace who, and I'll just say this kindly, are not very nice.
Yeah.
Um, and when you are co-vocationally and you're in that, you're in the fray, so to speak, it really helps you be a more compassionate preacher, teacher, leader,
Yes.
and pastor. Um, but there are challenges
Yeah.
that come along with being co-vocational. And I just want to throw out a couple here, Jim, or three of them,
Yeah.
and then I want to pause and ask you what you think about just as we're diving into this. I
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
pace is a huge
Yeah.
challenge for a co-vocational leader. How does a leader work in a marketplace full time, pastor a church, or lead a ministry at the same time, raise a family, if they've got a family, and have any hope of finding time for rest and rejuvenation?
Yeah.
So pace, I think, is a huge challenge. Right
Yeah.
alongside of that is energy management. We said in pod 203, we just said this, that we humans were created with limitations. We
Yeah.
we don't possess limitless energy. So the challenge is, how does a co-vocational leader find the juice, to give
Right.
appropriate energy to two or more jobs?
Right.
And then the piece, third challenge, I think, Jim, is guilt.
Mm.
And most of the time it's false guilt.
Yeah. Yeah.
That sneaking suspicion that I'm mediocre at best at both jobs,
Yeah.
or I'm killing one and I'm failing at the other. So, Jim, what do you think about what I've kind of laid out there
Yeah.
so
I it's funny. There's a strange pull, right? Your primary ministry is to God, and then to your family, and then to your congregational duties. So part of that duty to God and family is creating income, feeding, protecting,
Yes.
contributing. So, but I know your heart sometimes is not in spring this nut into this bolt in the factory. It's preaching a sermon on Sunday, and Deacon Bob is in the hospital, and Fred and Wilma are having marriage problems, and Pebbles crying, and you got all this stuff you got to deal with. I get it. I wish I could say, just be faithful in this season, and God will lead you out of that season into the next. But as you already pointed out, this is apostolic. This is not a problem to be solved, or a season to endure. This may be a calling that you're a part of. So
Wow.
yeah,
That's an
I
important
really,
point. I think what you just said there, Jim, is really
uh,
significant.
yeah. So I understand the desire to get out of it into the next thing,
Yep.
but that may or may not be the case. And I guess knowing that God has put you where He's put you with the grace on you to do what only He can do through you, and what only you can do through Him, and being okay with the realities and the
Sure.
limitations is it's huge. I think the self delusion, if I just had this, I could do that.
Right.
Maybe not. I think I asked my dad one time. He actually came to me and he said he was about oh just hit mid 80s, and he said I've learned the secret to life, and he's kind of a cut up guy. So I said, really, you know the secret to life, and he said,
Yeah.
yeah. I said, what is it? He said waking up every morning and believing before God that today is the greatest day of your life,
Well, that's
and
good.
and whatever comes your way, you just say, well, yeah, I got into a car accident, but it's the greatest day of my life. I don't know why yet, but it's the greatest day of my life. And
Yeah.
he said we waste so much time mourning what's past and excited about what isn't yet, that we miss the moments that we're actually living in. So I think in that co-vocational, bivocational, multivocational, whatever the verbiage, man, go to 7-Eleven and serve the best Slurpees that community has ever had, and
Yep.
and God's going to bless you one way or the other through your work, through
Right.
your labors. Yeah.
Yeah. And today's pod's not about how to go from co-vocational to a
Mm-mm.
full-time role. That's not what we're talking about
No.
today. It's
No.
how do we navigate the real challenges of this
Yeah.
and stay upright? How do we stay
Yeah.
healthy physically, mentally, and emotionally? Jim, I know we come back to this particular well that I'm about to share, and I'm going to share it really quickly. We come back to this so often that some of our watchers and listeners might go get a cup of coffee during this because they've heard it before. But I want to just touch on it. We're just going to touch on this, and then
Yeah.
we're gonna see how it impacts the ability to navigate this
Yeah.
challenging scenario that many pastors find themselves in,
Yeah.
and it has to do with work rest rhythms.
Yeah.
In answer to the previous question, how does a leader work in the marketplace full time, pastor a church at the same time, and yet have any hope to find space in
Yeah.
his world, in her world for family and rest and all that stuff?
Yeah. Yeah.
Here's 4 rhythms I would like uh, all of us who are listening, whether you're co-vocational or you have somebody on your team who's co-vocational, this is important for either situation.
Yeah.
Here's 4 work rest rhythms. I'm going to give them to you like rapid fire. We're not
Yeah.
going to really probe them at all, but just use them, kind of set up the rest of our time together. There's a daily rhythm.
Yes.
In Ephesians 1, or not Ephesians, in Genesis 1:5, we read these words, and then there was evening, and then there was morning, the first day.
Yeah.
And that phrase is repeated 5 additional times
Right.
in the book of Genesis, right at the beginning. And each of these segments were periods of God creatively outpouring energy, and each one of them was followed by a pause.
Yeah.
And at the very beginning of creation, we are introduced to this idea of work, pause, or some people have said, no, maybe it's pause, then work. And I don't
Yeah.
want to get too deep into that because that
Yeah.
would take the rest of our time unpacking it.
Yeah.
But there's this there's this daily rhythm that we're shown, and it has implications if you're co-vocational. Secondly, there's a weekly rhythm, and that weekly rhythm we call Sabbath, a day off,
Yeah.
And after completing the work of creation, God rested on the seventh day. Why did he do that? Because he was wiped out? No. He has limitless energy.
Yeah.
He rested, I think, to show us, to model for us a healthy rhythm.
Yes.
A third rhythm that we want to just touch on here is a quarterly rhythm. So every 90 days, I want to encourage, if you're co-vocational or if you're full-time and you have co-vocational staff, to get them or to get yourself out of your zip code and
Yeah.
take an hour, take 3 hours for relaxation, reflection, recreation,
Yeah.
rest, all the R words, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and when I do this, I'm full time at what I do. Um,
Yeah.
but when I practice this third rhythm, I get away from my house, Jim,
Yeah.
because when I'm here, my house is yelling at me.
Yes.
There is work to be done. There are projects to
Yeah.
happen.
Yeah.
And so this is a third rhythm we'd like you to consider. And then the fourth one is just an annual rhythm, and we're all familiar with this. It's vacation. I would just say this to those who are co-vocational. Disconnecting from work for a real vacation is not wasted time. It's not
Mm.
a luxury. It's not
Hmm.
selfish. It is
Yeah.
essential.
Yes.
Learning, remembering what it's like to play will actually help you be more productive
Yeah.
as a co-vocational leader. So
Yeah.
Jim, these if these rhythms for somebody who's co-vocational, they'll have to get very creative, right?
Yes. Yeah.
With these rhythms. And I want to stop there for a minute, and then
Yeah.
we're going to jump into some ideas about how to do this. But your thoughts,
Well, I'm
real
just
quick on the
I'm looking
rhythms.
at them. I'm looking at the daily, weekly, quarterly, and annual. I'm just looking at them, and like you said, this is going to be more challenging. Like the nightmare scenario, right? Co-vocational, heavily co-vocational,
Yes,
and three young kids. Billy's got a runny nose. I mean, just the nightmare scenario. I like the word you said. You're going to have to be creative, but
yes,
you can't exempt yourself. These are laws. These are not suggestions. These are principles by which we function or we break down. So that you I know you mentioned in previous things Sabbath. It's like I can't. I have to work Sunday, but I work the other 6 days to make. Well, can you work? Can you go from sundown till sundown? Can you be a full afternoon off? Can you? The
yeah,
thought that we can operate, we can function properly without rest, without rhythms, without refreshment, without all the R's. It's impossible. You cannot read a book and get from a book what you can only get from rest. You cannot get out of
good.
splitting. It might be good for your soul, but you're burning out your body. There's a rhythm and there's an order, and these are laws. These are physical, emotional, and spiritual laws that, once violated, carry with them a penalty. So you have to obey the law, or you'll be apprehended by the laws themselves, and you'll suffer the consequences. And I say too that thought of, I don't know, I being careful of staying out of debt, being careful of credit card
That's good.
usage, being careful of too much time on social media, being careful of. I think if we really manage co-vocational life, young family life, young married life well, we'll find there is enough, but we have to cut out some things that are just draws that don't
That's so
produce
good.
fruit. So
And
yeah,
that's so good, Jim. So what I'd like to try to do is let's take those first two rhythms, daily
yeah,
and the weekly, and let's put that let's layer on top of that this
okay,
co-vocational uh context.
yeah,
Um, so you're co-vocational, and we're talking about a daily rhythm, that there's some part of your day there needs to be a pause from work, and it's
yeah,
not 5 minutes before you collapse into bed
yeah,
exhausted. Um, Keep in mind that most human beings lose a huge amount of their productivity after 8 hours of work
yeah,
in a day.
right, right,
Now, if you're co-vocational, your days are likely going to exceed 8 hours. They
yeah,
probably will. So you're going to have to work harder than most to clock out at a reasonable time daily. And with pastoral ministry, sometimes ministry happens at nights.
yeah,
And it requires your presence. Just don't let it become every night.
yes.
Don't
Oh,
let it
oh,
become every night.
yeah,
Uh, and so maybe part of your daily rhythm is, hey, I'm going to take 2 days a week, and I'm done at 5 o'clock.
yeah,
And I'm not picking up work. I'm not answering emails. I'm not answering my
right,
phone. I
right.
from 5 until bedtime.
Yeah,
I'm doing a mini. I'm doing a mini. I'm doing a good rhythm.
yeah,
So I think sometimes we're all or nothing type of people, and
yeah,
we figure if I can't do this all the time the right way, then I'm not going to do it right any of the time. And I
yeah.
don't think that that's wise. So
No,
if you can get 3 days out of a week where you have a good like I'm punching out,
yeah,
that's better than none.
right, right.
Start with what you can, work with what you have in front of you. So if you
Yeah,
can get 3 days where, man, you're clocking out at a reasonable hour, you're on your
yeah,
way.
yes.
You're on your way. What do you think about that first
Yeah,
idea?
a friend of mine, we had a ton of kids come to a youth meeting unexpectedly. Hundreds of kids we weren't expecting showed up to this big event. And I asked him the next day, how did it go? And he said it was organized chaos. But he coined the phrase, it was chaotic. And I think what you're describing is, in the hecticness of life, like that doesn't, is it going to be always organized? Is it always going to be chaos? I don't know. Sometimes it's chaotic. Sometimes you do what you can to hold the surface tension together, so that you're not picking up the laundry, you're not picking up the trash, you're picking up a pizza and you're going home, and your wife doesn't have to cook that night, or your husband doesn't have to cook that night, and you're being together, playing catch in the backyard. I That pays dividends in your children's lives, that pays dividends in your marriage. And no, it's not a full weekend off and all the benefits. I get that,
Yeah.
but maybe what you're talking about to me, John, is there's default where life takes over, and there's design where God takes over. You're calling us to
100%.
live from design,
That's
because
right.
default is breaking the laws. You'll be arrested, you'll be apprehended, you'll pay penalties. So if
Yep.
chaotic is the best you got, man, just be chaotic.
Yep.
Yeah,
And then the second rhythm, this weekly rhythm, uh, just a personal story. Immediately after I graduated from Oral Roberts University, I started in a bivocational, co-vocational role I
yeah,
was a youth pastor at a church plant, and I worked full time in the
yeah,
marketplace. So 40 hours a week in the marketplace. I served as a youth pastor in a small rural church, and the idea back then of pastors taking a regular day off was not talked about much.
yeah.
So my
Mm,
work rest rhythm during those 2 years my weekly rhythm was really messed up.
yeah,
The work days were long. A full day off every week was problematic. Jim, I worked 7 days a week for 2 years. I would say probably 40 to 50, 40, 40, 40 to 45 weeks each year. Those first two
yeah,
years were 7 day
yeah.
weeks.
Mm,
And I had no idea working 80 hours per week was unsustainable. I started at 22, and I look back at being 22 and I think, how in the world did anything good happen?
yeah.
Like, if you don't believe in God, think about what you were like when you were 22, and that anything good came out of what you tried at that
Yeah.
age is a total miracle of the Lord.
Yeah, and that you made it to 23 is grace personified. Yeah, yeah, I
That's
agree.
right. And so if you're in a co-vocational role, maybe you can relate to this,
Yeah,
you know. Uh it might be next to impossible to get a full day off every week. So how about these two ideas? Maybe and we already mentioned this, I think, a little bit. Try stringing 2 to 3 nights in a row where you punch out at 5 o'clock.
yeah,
And that's kind of a that's you're working your way toward obedience
yes,
here.
yeah, yeah,
And or some pastors who are full vocational told me that at Friday at 5, they're done with their marketplace job. They don't pick up anything ministry related until noon on Saturday.
yeah,
And
yeah,
so that gives them, what's that? That's like a 19 hour
yeah. Right.
or yeah, it's like a 19-hour day off, Sabbath. So you're
Yeah,
close, right?
yeah, yeah,
Um, and so get creative.
Right.
Jim, I don't know if you have any other ideas on that, but those are two that came to
Well,
me, right?
just one, yeah, and that is you say, well, that 19 hours I have off, I got to mow the grass, go to Billy's Little League team, I got to do the grocery shopping, I gotta, and I get that, but remember, everybody that celebrates Sabbath has to prepare for Sabbath.
There you
And
go.
that would be my suggestion is like prepare for 6 days for that one day, or
So
prepare
good.
for 100 hours for that 19 hours. But if you do a meal prep on Monday night and you mow the grass on Tuesday night and I mean you're pacing that out so that you really set that time aside to be with God, to make memories with your family, to enjoy rest, to renew romance, to all these things. So
Right.
if that's the day you do all the other stuff, that's not really that's
Yeah.
not what Sabbath isn't to catch up. It's not a day of the week that God doesn't know about that we get to catch up. It's a day that God set aside. And I've said this before, but I think it bears repeating that whatever you choose not to put your hand to during Sabbath, you're releasing God's hand to during Sabbath.
That's
So
so
that
good.
that thought that I need to work 7 days a week because I have to, well, you're ignoring the principle that whatever you take your hands off of to honor God during Sabbath, He promises to put His hands to. So there's some things I can't do, and it bothers me during Sabbath because I need to be doing this, but I'm reminding myself by not touching it to honor God, God is touching it for me right now. And of course, we've seen countless times, right? You said it before, right? We tell everybody give 10%, God will bless the 90. We all understand that one. We'll give God one day, He'll bless the other six. For some reason, that one eludes us as pastors.
Yeah. Right.
But it's
But what you just said there, I think is so profound that on during that Sabbath stretch, what I take my hand off of, I release
yeah,
to his hand.
yeah,
And
yeah,
that's such a beautiful picture. And that's so
yeah,
encouraging that, God's still at work when I'm not.
yeah.
And sometimes when I'm not, he's even well, he's always at work in a more productive way than I am. But
Yes,
I
He
mean,
is.
what comes out of doing your very best to try to be obedient
Yeah,
here, there
yeah,
is good fruit that's going to come on multiple layers in your life. Before we close it up today, Jim, I want to just speak to lead pastors for a minute who have co-vocational. So if you're a full-time lead pastor and you have some
yeah.
co-vocational staff, just a couple of
Please.
thoughts.
Yeah,
And I encourage you to collaborate with your co-vocational staff, collaborate with them to create a sensible and sustainable schedule.
yeah,
If they're working 9 to 5 in the marketplace, set reasonable hours for the work they do at the church.
yeah.
And I
Please.
think it's going to require, I don't think this is a one and done type of approach. I think this is going to be an ongoing, regular
Yes.
piece of communication between
Yeah,
you and your staff, but create a space where um, you are giving them the sense that you're on their team here and
yeah,
you're wanting to work together with them, work with them, especially if they're a valued member of the team.
yes.
Don't Can I just encourage you as a lead pastor, if you're full time and you have co-vocational, please don't say, well, back in the day when I was, blah,
Right.
blah, blah. That might
Right,
be
right.
true, but that's not helpful. That doesn't
Yeah,
help
right.
anybody.
Yeah,
Bragging about your workaholism 40 years ago doesn't help.
right. Right.
And
Yeah,
and so that's one thing. And the other thing, and it's closely related to this, Jim, is I want to encourage lead pastors with co-vocational uh, staff. Give them permission to inform you when you are giving them more work than they can realistically handle.
yes. Yeah.
Now, I do that as the leader of Converge Coaching. What
Sure you
what
do.
do I what do
Yeah,
I tell all my team members? If we're giving you more than
yeah,
you can handle in a healthy way, you have permission to speak freely and
yeah,
say, I can't do that.
yeah,
I don't have the space to do that. And we respect you all enough, that, hey, we're not going to push you past that. So
yeah,
let it be this joint effort between you and this co-vocational person. Hey, if somebody's co-vocational and you think they're acting a little bit lazy, it's okay to push. But
yeah,
please make it safe for them to walk into your office and say,
yeah,
boss, um, I don't know how I'm going to handle all of this stuff. Can we figure
Yeah.
something?
Right. But I think that touching base, how are you doing? How's the ministry doing? How's home going?
There you go.
How are your Sabbaths been? Are you working out? Are those questions. I think nowhere do we find the word boss in scripture, but we
Right.
find words like father. I think even above the words pastor or bishop or apostle, being a spiritual father. So if God's blessed you with a staff, maybe if you took the position of a parent, a father or mother, so that even the mistakes you made, you don't want them to make. So you ask probing questions. Are you getting enough rest? When was the last time you had a date night? You
Yeah.
know, how are you doing financially? How's your other job going? Anything we can do to accommodate your success? I think if we're gatekeepers and we're bosses and we're taskmasters, we're not serving them. And if we're not serving them, there's a good chance eventually they'll not be serving us as a congregation. So setting them up to succeed, part of that's on your shoulders.
Yes.
You as the leader have to be aware. My wife actually fired one of our staff members one time. She walked in, she said, I've already talked to your wife and you are fired. And he said, what? Because I told you to take a day off. My wife leads our staff. I told you to do this. You came in anyway. We've talked about it. She says you're getting grouchy at home, so you're fired. And he said, well, how do I fix this? She goes, well, you're fired for the next 48 hours. So she got him a hotel room and had already had the secretary cancel all the appointments, handed him an envelope with $100. The room was already paid for one night. You and your children, you and your family are going away. This is the last time, though, you're fired for 48 hours. After this is my last warning. After this, you need to listen to me. And so are we perfect at this? No, but you have to be dishonest with us to get away with this. You have to lie to us because we're going to ask you these questions because we're like Converge. If you're in it, we want you in it to win it for the long haul. We want you to have a good time doing it. You want your kids to feel like you know the ministry stole my parent, or my spouse is having an affair with ministry. None of that's allowed. So if you have bandwidth, then give it. If you don't, then maybe you need to minimize some other things. If you don't have enough money to pay your rent, quit playing the lottery. That's pretty simple, right? If you don't have
Yes.
time to be
Yep.
married, then maybe you should quit social media for a season or
Yeah.
forever. For the love of God, quit it forever. So yeah, good one, John. Good one. Any closing thoughts?
Yeah. Just one. And,
Yeah.
a lead pastor who's full time might be listening to this and wondering, why should I work hard at helping my co-vocational staff with this stuff? No one helped me. Well, again,
Oh,
we already talked about that, right?
yeah.
Um, Or you might be co-vocational thinking, why should I work at this myself? Because
Yeah.
listen, co-vocational pastors in general, doesn't matter if you're co-vocational or not, cannot escape the negative consequences of
Yeah.
working and living out of rhythm for an extended period of time. It will
Yeah.
catch up to you. And the way it catches up to you, irritability, fatigue, lack of focus, anxiety,
Yeah.
depression,
Yeah.
those things will knock, not all of them, maybe a few of them, maybe all of them will knock
Yeah.
on your door often suddenly when you're living on the edge of exhaustion. And you'll have a revolving door of staff if you've failed to pay attention to this stuff.
Yes. Yeah. And
Um,
maybe that's a litmus test. How am I doing at this? Well, let me ask you, how many staff members have come and gone? How long do they stay? What's their reason for leaving?
yeah,
Those are good litmus tests. Those are honesties. Yeah.
right.
Right
So
on.
that's what I have today, Jim.
Awesome, John. Thank you. Thank you so much. And guys that are, watching, and I'm Midwestern, so guys means men and women, people that are watching, like the thought that a simple conversation like this can radically change the trajectory of your life and the life of your staff
Mm.
is evidence of it's been a good investment of 30 minutes. And one of the things we like to do as Converge is to offer you 30 minutes, not in a mass setting. This was something that somebody requested. John was kind enough to prepare this time for him and people like him. But this is open to anybody. If you would like to speak to somebody that's a part of the Converge team, part of the Converge family, go to convergecoach.com and you'll see the first thing that comes up is a contact us link. And if there's something we can do to help you work through something, and maybe this involves coaching, maybe this involves counseling, we can recommend those things. But our goal, I mean, the reason we give this away for free is to generate a healthy body of leaders that are having a good time, They're in it for the long haul and being successful. We're committed to that half hour as much as we are committed to this one. So uh, click on it. Let's spend some time. How can we help you? How can we serve you? What can we do to keep you in this doing well? And obviously you are. It's Tuesday. You haven't quit. And God bless you for that, dear leader. So thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. As always, we're a click or two away. We're a phone call away. We're a text away. We love you guys. We're praying for you as you continue to lead from alignment.